I, 32, F, was recovering from a necessary surgery when I first noticed it was gone. The procedure had been serious, leaving me confined to our bed for the better part of 2 weeks, relying on my husband, Mark, for everything. He brought me meals, fluffed my pillows, and told me to just focus on healing. I thought he was being the perfect caring partner. The first few days were a blur of pain medication and sleep, but as the fog began to lift, so did my awareness of my surroundings. That was when the cold, sharp feeling of absence pricked at my consciousness. My grandmother's necklace was not in its usual spot. It was a delicate gold chain with a deep blue sapphire, surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was the last thing she gave me before she passed away, her hand trembling as she fastened it around my neck. "This stone has seen our family through everything," she had whispered, her voice thin as paper. "Now it will watch over you." I never took it off unless I was showering, and even then, I placed it carefully in the small, velvet-lined box on my nightstand. The box was still there, but when my fingers, weak from inactivity, fumbled to open the lid, it was empty. My heart gave a painful lurch. It was probably nothing. Mark had likely moved it for safekeeping while I was recovering. He was always worried about things getting lost or broken. I tried to calm the frantic beating in my chest. There was a simple explanation for this. There had to be. I waited for him to come back upstairs with my lunch tray. When he entered the room, a cheerful smile on his face, I tried to keep my own voice light. "Honey, have you seen my necklace?" I asked. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, so quickly I might have imagined it. "Your necklace? Which one?" he asked, his tone a little too casual. "You know which one," I said, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Grandma's. The sapphire. It wasn't in its box." "Oh, that one," he said, busying himself with arranging the food on the bedside table. "I put it somewhere safe for you. You were so out of it after the surgery, I was worried you might lose it." Relief washed over me, so potent it made me feel dizzy. Of course, it was a perfectly logical explanation. I had been worried over nothing. "Oh, thank you," I breathed, feeling foolish for my panic. "Where did you put it?" He paused, his back still to me. "I put it in the safe," he said finally. "Just until you're back on your feet. We can get it out then. Now, eat your soup before it gets cold." His explanation made sense. It was responsible. It was what a caring husband would do. But something about his demeanor felt wrong. He would not look at me. The way he kept his back turned, the way his voice sounded just a little too forced, it sent a fresh wave of unease through me. I let it go for the moment, telling myself I was being paranoid. The medication was probably still making me emotional and suspicious. I ate my soup, but the food felt like ash in my mouth. The feeling of wrongness did not go away. It settled deep in my bones, a cold, heavy weight that I could not ignore. I decided to wait. I would get stronger, and then I would ask him to open the safe. Then I would see my necklace, and all of this would feel like a silly, feverish dream. A few days later, I was able to move around the house a bit more. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, and I was slowly weaning myself off the stronger painkillers. My mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. Mark was at work, and the house was quiet. The thought of the necklace had been a constant, low-grade hum in the back of my mind. His excuse was plausible, but it did not sit right with me. He had never been that proactive about my jewelry before. If anything, he was usually the one who left his watch and wallet lying around. I made my way slowly to his office, where we kept the small home safe in a closet. I knew the combination. We had agreed on it together, a significant date from our early relationship. My hands were shaking slightly as I turned the dial. Left, right, left. The lock clicked open. I pulled the heavy metal door toward me, my breath catching in my throat. I peered inside. There were files, some emergency cash, our passports, and a few other important documents. There was no velvet box. There was no gold chain. There was no sapphire necklace. I stood there for a long time, just staring into the empty space where it should have been. The blood drained from my face. He had lied to me. He had looked me in the eye, or rather had avoided looking me in the eye, and told me a direct, calculated lie. The betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. It was not just about the necklace anymore. It was about the trust that had just been shattered into a million pieces. Why would he lie? The question echoed in the silent room. If he had just lost it, he could have told me. We could have looked for it together. Lying meant he was hiding something. My mind started racing, trying to piece together the last couple of weeks. He had been so attentive, so caring. Or had he? Looking back, his attentiveness felt more like a performance. He was always busy, always fluttering around, but there was a strange distance in his eyes. He seemed stressed, more than just the stress of caring for a sick spouse. He had been taking a lot of phone calls in the other room, whispering into his phone with a hushed urgency. At the time, I had assumed it was work-related. Now, a more sinister possibility began to take shape. I closed the safe, my movements stiff and robotic. I needed to know what was going on. My first instinct was to confront him the moment he walked through the door, to scream and cry and demand an explanation. But some deeper, colder part of me held back. If he was lying, a direct confrontation would only lead to more lies. He would deny everything, and it would be my word against his. I needed proof. I needed to understand what had happened before I said a single word. My mind, now sharp with adrenaline and a burgeoning, icy rage, started to work. Where would someone go if they needed money quickly? The image of a pawn shop flashed in my mind. It was a horrible thought, one that made me feel sick to my stomach. Mark had a good job. We were comfortable. We were not desperate for cash. Or so I had thought. I made my way to the small table in the hallway where we dropped our mail and keys. His car keys were there. My own car was still parked in the garage, untouched since before my surgery. With a surge of determination, I grabbed his keys. I was not strong enough to drive yet, but I could certainly search his car. The garage was cool and smelled of gasoline and old newspapers. I clicked the button on the key fob, and the car unlocked with a chirp. I opened the passenger side door and started to look through the glove compartment. It was filled with old receipts, napkins, and user manuals. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I checked the center console, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that I would find nothing, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. Dread that I would find exactly what I was looking for. And then I saw it. Tucked into a side pocket of the driver's side door was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a receipt. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. The name of the shop was printed at the top. Prestige Pawnbrokers. The date was just 3 days after my surgery. And then, under the description of the items sold, were the words, "One lady's gold necklace, sapphire with diamond accents." The amount was listed next to it. It was a substantial sum, far more than I would have expected from a pawn shop, but still a fraction of the necklace's actual insured value. I sank back against the car seat, the receipt clutched in my hand. The air in the garage suddenly felt thin and suffocating. So this was it. This was the proof. He had not just lied to me. He had stolen from me. He had taken the most precious thing I owned, a piece of my family's history, a piece of my heart, and sold it while I was helpless in bed. The caring husband, the worried partner, it was all an act. He had been tending to me with one hand while robbing me with the other. The cold rage I had felt earlier was now a blazing fire. The question was no longer just why he had done it. The question was what I was going to do about it. I walked back into the house, my legs feeling unsteady. I placed the receipt on the kitchen counter, smoothing it out with my hand. I needed to think. I needed a plan. The old me, the me from before the surgery, would have confronted him immediately, tears streaming down my face. But the woman standing in the kitchen now was different. The betrayal had carved something soft out of me and replaced it with something hard and sharp. I would not give him the satisfaction of my tears. I would not give him the chance to spin more lies. I would gather my facts. I would build my case. And then, when he least expected it, I would bring his world crashing down around him. My first step was to understand the money. Where had it gone? The amount on the receipt was significant. It was not pocket change. It was enough to make a difference, to pay for something substantial. I went back to his office and turned on our shared computer. I logged into our joint bank account, my fingers flying across the keyboard. My eyes scanned the list of recent transactions. And there it was. A cash deposit for the exact amount on the pawn shop receipt, made on the same day. My stomach twisted. He had not even tried to hide it. He must have thought I was too sick to notice, too trusting to ever check. But then I saw the next transaction, just 2 days later. A transfer out. The entire amount gone. It had been moved to an account I did not recognize. The name on the transfer was not a company or a bill payment. It was a person's name.
Chloe.
His sister. My breath caught in my chest.
Chloe.
Of all people. She had always been a source of tension in our marriage. She was older than Mark, and in her eyes, he could do no wrong. She had always treated me with a thinly veiled condescension, as if I were some temporary distraction who was not quite good enough for her perfect little brother. She had visited a few times while I was recovering. She brought flowers and magazines, all while making little passive-aggressive comments. "You must be driving poor Mark crazy, needing so much help," she had said with a tight smile. "He's just so selfless, always putting everyone else first." I had gritted my teeth and thanked her, dismissing it as her usual brand of toxic sweetness. But now, seeing her name on that bank transfer, her words took on a new, sinister meaning. This was not just Mark. This was a conspiracy. They had done this together. The fire of my anger burned hotter, clearer. This was not a desperate act to cover a secret debt. This felt different. This felt personal. Chloe had always been jealous of me, of my relationship with Mark, of the life we had built. She saw me as an outsider who had stolen her brother from her. What could they possibly need that much money for, so urgently that they would resort to theft and deception? My mind reeled with possibilities, each one darker than the last. I needed to talk to someone. I could not carry this alone. My best friend, Sarah, was the first person who came to mind. She was practical, level-headed, and she had never been a fan of Chloe. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over her name. I hesitated. Once I said the words out loud, it would all become real. There would be no going back. I took a deep breath and pressed the call button. "Hey, how are you feeling?" Sarah's cheerful voice came through the line. Tears pricked my eyes, but I forced them back.
"I'm
not great, Sarah," I said, my own voice sounding weak and shaky. "Can I talk to you? Something has happened." "Of course," she said immediately, her tone shifting to one of concern. "What's wrong? Is it your recovery? Do you need me to come over?" "No, it's not that," I said, taking another steadying breath. "It's Mark. I think he's done something terrible," and then the whole story came tumbling out. The missing necklace, the lie about the safe, the receipt from the pawn shop, the bank transfer to Chloe. I told her everything, my voice cracking with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Sarah listened patiently, not interrupting once. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "That absolute snake," she finally said, her voice dripping with venom. "And his wicked witch of a sister. I never trusted her. I am so sorry this is happening to you. I don't know what to do," I confessed, the full weight of the situation crashing down on me.
"He stole from me, Sarah."
"He stole my grandmother's necklace." "Okay, listen to me," she said, her voice firm and grounding. "You are not going to fall apart.
You are going to be smart about this.
You have the receipt and you know about the bank transfer. That's your leverage. Do not confront him yet. Not until you know exactly what they used that money for. That's the missing piece." She was right. A confrontation without all the facts would be a mistake. It would give them an opportunity to concoct a new story, a sob story about some secret emergency that would make me feel guilty for being angry. I needed the full truth. "How do I find that out?" I asked. "You need to play the part," Sarah advised. "Pretend you still believe the necklace is in the safe. Be the loving, recovering wife. Let him think he's gotten away with it. People get careless when they think they're safe. He or Chloe will slip up. You just need to be ready when they do. Her words solidified my resolve. She was right. This was not a time for emotional outbursts. This was a time for strategy. I ended the call with Sarah, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just a victim. I was an investigator. I would bide my time, watch, and wait, and I would uncover the truth, no matter how ugly it was. That evening, when Mark came home from work, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I greeted him with a weak but genuine-looking smile. I asked about his day. I did not mention the necklace. I pretended that his lie had satisfied me completely. He seemed to relax in my presence, the tension that had been in his shoulders for weeks slowly melting away. He probably thought I was too weak, too distracted by my recovery to notice anything. He had underestimated me. That was going to be his biggest mistake. Over the next few days, I kept up the facade. I let him dote on me, all the while watching his every move, listening to his every word. The strain of the deception was immense. Every time he touched me, I had to fight the urge to flinch away. Every time he told me he loved me, the words felt like acid in my ears. But I held firm, my eyes fixed on the goal. I needed to know what they had done with the money. The first clue came from Chloe. She called one afternoon, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Just calling to see how our favorite patient is doing," she chirped. "I'm feeling a bit better, thanks," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "That's wonderful to hear," she gushed. "Mark has just been so worried about you. He deserves a little treat, don't you think? He's been working so hard and dealing with all this stress. I think he needs something to cheer him up. A little treat." The phrase sent a chill down my spine. "Oh," I said, trying to sound mildly interested. "What did you have in mind?" "Oh, I don't know," she said, a sly coyness in her voice. "Something shiny, maybe. Something fast. He's always wanted one. He deserves to have some fun. Something shiny and fast. A car." The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. A brand new car. Was that what this was all about? They stole my family heirloom, a piece of my history, to buy a car? The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of it was breathtaking. I felt a wave of nausea. This was worse than any secret debt. This was pure, decadent greed. "That sounds nice," I managed to say, my voice tight. I had to get off the phone before I said something I would regret. "I'm sorry, Chloe, I'm feeling a bit tired. I should probably rest." "Of course, dear," she said, her voice oozing false sympathy. "You just rest up. We'll handle everything. We'll handle everything." The words hung in the air after she disconnected. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my mind racing.
A car.
It seemed so trivial, so disgustingly materialistic. But for Mark, it made a twisted kind of sense. He had always been obsessed with status, with appearances. He drove a sensible sedan, but he was always pointing out expensive sports cars on the road, his eyes filled with a covetous longing. And Chloe, his ever-indulgent sister, would be the one to encourage such a foolish, selfish desire. Now I had a theory, but I still needed proof. A car was a major purchase. There would be a paper trail. I just had to find it. I waited until Mark was in the shower the next morning. I went back to his office, my heart pounding a familiar rhythm of dread and determination. I searched his desk drawers, his files, even the pockets of the jackets hanging in his closet. Nothing. They were being careful. Then I remembered the shared computer. He often did his personal business on it, assuming I never looked at anything other than my email. I sat down and opened the web browser. I went through the history, scrolling back through weeks of searches. And then I found it. His search history was filled with visits to luxury car websites. He had been looking at one model in particular, a sleek, obscenely expensive sports car. He had visited the local dealership's website multiple times. He had even used their online tool to build and price his perfect model, choosing the color, the interior, the ridiculous, high-end sound system. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I went to the dealership's website myself. I navigated to their pre-owned inventory, but on a hunch, I checked their social media page as well. Dealerships loved to post pictures of happy customers with their new cars. I scrolled through their recent posts, my eyes scanning the smiling faces. And then I saw him. It was a picture of Mark standing next to a gleaming black sports car, the exact model he had been researching. He had a triumphant, almost smug grin on his face. Standing next to him, beaming with pride, was Chloe. The caption read, "Congratulations to Mark on his incredible new ride. A big thank you to his sister Chloe for helping make it happen. Welcome to the family." The post was dated just 5 days ago. I stared at the screen, the image burning itself into my brain. The happy siblings celebrating their purchase. A purchase funded by the sale of my grandmother's legacy. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, that for a moment, I could not breathe. All his talk of being stressed, of being worried about me, it was all a lie to cover this.
He was not stressed.
He was excited. He was celebrating. I saved the picture. I printed it out. I also found the exact listing for the car on the dealership's website, complete with the vehicle identification number. With a little more digging online, I was able to pull up the sales record. It was registered in Mark's name. The down payment listed on the financing agreement was just a few $100s shy of the amount he had gotten from the pawn shop. It was all there. The complete, irrefutable story of his greed and deceit. I now had everything I needed. The pawn shop receipt, the bank statement showing the transfer to Chloe, and now, the proof of purchase for the car, complete with a celebratory photo. My collection of evidence was complete. The quiet, methodical part of my plan was over. Now came the confrontation. But it would not be a quiet one. It would not be a private argument in our bedroom. No, this deserved an audience. This deserved to be brought into the light, where his lies would shrivel and die. I thought about the best way to do it. I wanted to maximize the impact. I wanted to strip away his carefully constructed facade in front of the people whose opinions he cared about most, his family. His parents, in particular, were good people. They were old-fashioned, with a strong sense of right and wrong. They adored me and were always talking about the importance of family and integrity. They would be horrified by what their son had done. And Chloe. I wanted to see the look on her face when her role in this whole sordid affair was exposed. I wanted her to feel the shame she so richly deserved. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise. His parents' wedding anniversary was next week. They were having a small family dinner to celebrate. It was the perfect stage. Mark, Chloe, and their parents all gathered together. It would be a celebration, all right, but not the one they were expecting. I spent the next few days in a state of calm, focused detachment. I continued my performance as the oblivious, recovering wife. I even asked Mark one evening, in a soft, hopeful voice, "Do you think I'll be well enough to wear my grandmother's necklace for your parents' anniversary dinner?" It would mean so much to me. I watched him closely as I said it. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes before he quickly masked it. "Oh, honey," he said, his voice thick with false regret. "I don't know if that's a good idea. You're still recovering. We shouldn't risk taking it out of the safe just yet. Let's just wait until you're 100%. "You're right," I said, looking down at my hands. Of course. It was a silly thought. I let him believe he had once again dodged a bullet. I let him think he was in control. The condescension in his eyes was almost unbearable, but I held on to the image of his face when he would finally learn the truth. That image gave me strength. But before the dinner, there was one more piece to this puzzle that I had to address. It was something that had been nagging at me, a detail that Mark and Chloe, in their greedy haste, had completely overlooked. It was the secret I had held close for years, the one my grandmother had shared with me on her deathbed. The secret of the necklace. My grandmother was a shrewd woman. She loved her beautiful things, but she was not sentimental to the point of foolishness. Years before she gave the necklace to me, she had grown concerned about wearing such a valuable piece of jewelry. So she had a plan. She took the necklace to her private jeweler, a man she had trusted for decades. He carefully removed the large, flawless sapphire from its setting. He replaced it with a perfect, lab-grown replica. The replica was visually identical, beautiful in its own right, but it was worth only a fraction of the original. The real sapphire, the stone that had been in our family for generations, was set into a new piece of jewelry. But not a beautiful one. My grandmother was clever. She had it placed in the center of a gaudy, old-fashioned brooch. It was all sharp angles and dull, bronze-colored metal. It looked like something you would find in a dusty corner of a thrift store. She gave the brooch to me at the same time as the necklace. "The world will only see the sparkle," she had told me, her eyes twinkling. "They won't see the substance. You keep the substance safe, my dear. That's the real treasure." So the necklace Mark had stolen and sold for a quick payday was, in fact, the less valuable of the two pieces. The pawn shop would have tested the gold and the small diamonds, and they would have seen the main stone was a sapphire, but they would not have priced it as the priceless family heirloom Mark believed it to be. They would have given him a fair price for what it was, a beautiful piece of jewelry with a lab-grown stone. He had sold a symbol, not the substance. The real treasure, the ugly brooch with the priceless sapphire at its heart, was safely hidden away. It was in a place Mark would never think to look, tucked inside an old shoebox at the back of my closet, filled with my childhood diaries and old photographs. He had stolen my trust, but he had not stolen my inheritance. Not the real one, anyway. This knowledge was my secret weapon. It was the final, devastating twist in the story I was about to tell. The night of the anniversary dinner arrived. I took my time getting ready, a strange sense of calm settling over me. I chose a simple, elegant dress. I did my makeup carefully. When I looked in the mirror, the woman staring back at me looked tired, but her eyes were clear and resolute. Before we left, I went to my closet. I retrieved the old shoebox. I took out the ugly brooch and pinned it to my dress. It looked completely out of place, a bizarre, jarring accessory. It was perfect. Mark saw it as we were walking out the door. He wrinkled his nose in distaste. "What is that thing you're wearing?" he asked. "Oh, this," I said, touching the brooch lightly. It was my grandmother's, too. I know it's not as pretty as the necklace, but I just felt like wearing it tonight. For her. He shrugged, his mind clearly elsewhere. "If you say so. Let's go, we're going to be late." He was preoccupied, probably thinking about his shiny new car parked outside, a car he would have to hide from his parents for now, likely concocting some story about getting a great deal on a used model. He had no idea what was coming. We arrived at his parents' house. They greeted us with warm hugs. His mother, Helen, fussed over me, asking if I was feeling all right. His father, George, gave Mark a hearty slap on the back. Chloe was already there, of course, looking smug as she sipped a glass of wine. The four of them were a perfect little family unit, a unit I had once thought I was a part of. Tonight, I would show them the rot that had taken root in their perfect family tree. We sat down to dinner. The conversation was light and cheerful. They reminisced about their wedding day. They talked about their upcoming vacation. Mark and Chloe exchanged a few knowing glances, their shared secret a palpable energy between them. I stayed quiet for the most part, eating my food, biding my time. I could feel their eyes on me, probably interpreting my silence as lingering weakness from my surgery. Let them think that. Let them underestimate me one last time. Finally, dessert was served. Helen brought out a beautiful anniversary cake. As she was cutting the slices, I cleared my throat. All eyes turned to me. The room fell silent. This was it. The moment had come. "Before we have cake," I began, my voice steady and clear, "I'd like to say something. I'd like to propose a toast." Helen smiled warmly. "What a lovely idea, dear." I raised my water glass. "I'd like to toast to family," I said, looking directly at Mark. "And to honesty. And to the sacrifices we make for the people we love." Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Chloe's smile became a little more fixed. "Mark, in particular, has made a huge sacrifice for me recently," I continued, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "While I was recovering, he took on so much. He was so stressed and worried. And in a moment of desperation, he did something he thought was necessary to protect us. His parents looked at him with concern. "What is she talking about, Mark?" George asked. Mark shot me a panicked look, a silent plea for me to stop. I ignored him. He was facing a terrible, secret business debt. I went on, my voice filled with manufactured sympathy. He was too ashamed to tell me. He needed money, and he needed it fast. So he sold my grandmother's sapphire necklace. The room was filled with a stunned silence. Helen's hand flew to her mouth. George stared at his son, his face a mask of disbelief. "You what?" he finally choked out. Mark's face was pale. It's not like that," he stammered. "I was going to buy it back. I was protecting her." "Yes," I said, nodding. "He was protecting me. He sold my most prized possession to save us from financial ruin. And I think that's a sacrifice worth acknowledging." I looked at Chloe. In fact, Chloe knew all about it. She was so supportive. She even helped him manage the money. "Isn't that right, Chloe?" Chloe looked like a deer in the headlights. I was just trying to help my brother," she said weakly. "So selfless," I said, my voice turning to ice. "The two of you, working together to handle that terrible, crippling debt. A debt so large that the money for my necklace had to be used immediately. It must have been a huge relief when that debt was finally paid." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then, I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I placed it on the table. It was the printout of the photo from the car dealership's social media page. The photo of Mark and Chloe, beaming next to the brand new sports car. "It's funny though," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Because that secret, crippling business debt looks an awful lot like a down payment on a $60,000 car." I slid the photo across the table toward George. He picked it up, his hands trembling. He stared at the image of his smiling children, then at Mark, his expression hardening into one of cold fury. Helen leaned over to look, and a small gasp escaped her lips. "Mark." George's voice was low and menacing. "What is this?" Mark was speechless. He just stared at the photo, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Chloe, however, found her voice. "He deserved it," she snapped, her composure finally breaking. "He's been working so hard, and she's been a constant drain on him for weeks with this surgery. He needed something for himself." "A drain?" Helen whispered, her eyes wide with horror as she looked from her daughter to me. "So you stole from her?" George roared, slamming his hand on the table. "You stole her grandmother's necklace to buy a toy. I was going to pay her back." Mark finally managed to yell, his voice cracking with desperation. "I just needed some time." "Pay me back with what, Mark?" I asked calmly. "With the money you don't have? The money you'll be spending on the monthly payments for this car for the next 7 years?" I then pulled out the other documents. The pawn receipt, the bank statement showing the transfer to Chloe, the vehicle sales agreement in his name. I laid them out on the table, one by one, like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "Here's the receipt from the pawn shop," I said, pointing to it. "Here's the proof that the money went straight to Chloe's account. And here's the proof that the money was used as a down payment. There was no debt. There was only greed. Your greed." The room was silent again, the only sound the heavy breathing of Mark's father. Chloe was crying, not with remorse, but with the angry frustration of being caught. Mark just stared at the papers, his face ashen. He had been so thoroughly, so completely exposed. His lies had nowhere left to hide. But I was not finished.
There was one more piece to this.
One final turn of the knife. I looked at Mark, a flicker of what might have been pity, but was actually just cold satisfaction in my eyes. "You know, Mark," I said softly, "the saddest part of all of this? The most pathetic part? It's that you went to all this trouble. You threw away our marriage. You destroyed your family's trust in you. For a fake." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with confusion. "What are you talking about?" I reached up and unpinned the ugly brooch from my dress. I held it in the palm of my hand. "This is what I'm talking about," I said. I slid the brooch across the table to him. "The necklace you sold? The sapphire was a lab-grown replica. A very good one, but a replica nonetheless. My grandmother had it replaced years ago for security. I let that sink in. I watched the dawning horror on his face as he started to understand. The real sapphire, I continued, my voice as clear as a bell, the one that's been in my family for over 100 years, is in that ugly brooch you've made fun of so many times. You sold the costume piece, Mark. You got a few $1,000s for a necklace that was mostly sentimental. The real value, the thing you were actually after, has been sitting in my closet the entire time. To prove my point, I pulled one last document from my purse. It was a certified appraisal of the sapphire in the brooch, which I had obtained quietly the week before. I placed it on the table. The value listed on the paper was astronomical. It was more than 10 times what he had gotten for the necklace. It was enough to have bought his stupid car outright, with plenty left over. The finality of his failure, the sheer, idiotic totality of it, finally broke him. He stared at the brooch, then at the appraisal, then at me. A choked, guttural sound escaped his lips. He had not just been cruel and greedy. He had been a fool. And now everyone knew it. George stood up, his face a thunderous mask of rage and disappointment. "Get out," he said to Mark, his voice shaking. "Both of you, get out of my house." Chloe started to protest, but one look from her father silenced her. She and Mark scrambled up from their chairs, their faces streaked with tears of shame and fury. They practically ran from the room, unable to bear the weight of the judgment in their parents' eyes. After they were gone, the house was deathly quiet. Helen was openly sobbing now, her face in her hands. George came over to me and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion.
I am so sorry.
"I don't know what to say. We raised him better than this." "I know you did," I said softly. "This wasn't your fault." I stayed for a little while longer, trying to comfort Helen, but the atmosphere was too heavy with grief and betrayal. I eventually said my goodbyes and drove myself home. To my home. Not our home anymore. The house felt strangely empty, but it was a clean, peaceful kind of empty. It was the absence of lies. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Mark, saddled with a new car payment he could not afford and cut off financially by his furious parents, was in no position to argue. The evidence I had was overwhelming. My lawyer used his attempted theft of a major asset, proven by the pawn ticket for the necklace he thought was real, as leverage. He walked away with his car, his debt, and very little else. I kept the house. The aftermath was a series of quiet conversations that confirmed I had done the right thing. I met with Sarah for coffee a few weeks later. She had heard whispers through the grapevine. "Everyone is talking about it," she told me, stirring her latte. "No one can believe what Mark and Chloe did. They've completely alienated themselves. Chloe's friends are avoiding her, and Mark's colleagues are looking at him sideways. You didn't just expose them to the family. You exposed them to everyone." It was a strange feeling. I had not sought public humiliation for them, only justice for myself. But their actions, once brought into the light, had their own natural consequences. "Good," I said, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. They built their lives on appearances. It seems fitting that the truth of who they are is now the only thing people see. A week after that, I received a call from Helen, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law. Her voice was hesitant, full of shame. "I just wanted to call and apologize again," she said. "For everything. For not seeing what Chloe was like, for not realizing what Mark was capable of." "It's not your fault, Helen," I repeated, my voice gentle. I held no ill will toward her or George. They were victims in this too, their family torn apart by the greed of their children. "George and we've had a long talk with them," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "We told them we wouldn't be helping Mark with his financial mess. He made this bed, and he needs to lie in it. And Chloe, I don't think I can look at her the same way again. The cruelty of it, to do that to you when you were so vulnerable," her voice broke. We talked for a while longer. She told me that she and George would always consider me family and that their door was always open to me. I thanked her, my heart aching for the good people who had been caught in the crossfire of their children's selfishness. The call provided a sense of closure with that side of the family. They saw the truth, and they had chosen the side of integrity. The final piece of the fallout came indirectly. I was having my car serviced a month later, and I ran into a mutual acquaintance of Mark's and mine, a man named David, who worked with him. He looked awkward when he saw me, but he approached me anyway. "Hey," he said, shifting his weight. "I heard about you and Mark. I'm really sorry." "Thank you, David," I said simply. "Listen, I don't want to gossip," he said, lowering his voice, "but things are not going well for him. That new car of his got repossessed last week. He couldn't make the payments. He tried to borrow money from everyone at the office, but after word got out about what he did, nobody trusts him. He's a pariah." I felt a faint, cold echo of something that might have been pity, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He had brought this all upon himself. The car, the symbol of his betrayal, was gone. He was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions. He had traded his marriage, his family's respect, and his reputation for a fleeting moment of status, and now he had lost that too. Life moved on. I focused on my recovery, both physical and emotional. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of the betrayal. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I slowly began to build a new life for myself, one based on my own strength and my own values. The house, once a place of painful memories, started to feel like a sanctuary again. It was mine, free from the taint of his lies. One evening, I was cleaning out some old boxes, making space for my new beginning. I came across the velvet box that had once held the replica necklace. I opened it and ran my fingers along the empty indentation. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the sentimental value that was lost. But then I went to my closet. I took out the ugly brooch. I held it up to the light, and the ancient sapphire at its center seemed to glow with a deep, inner fire. It had seen our family through everything, and now it had seen me through this. Mark thought he had sold my past, a link to my grandmother, and my history. He was wrong. He only sold a copy. He thought he was securing his future, a future filled with shiny, fast things.
He was wrong about that too.
In his desperate, foolish greed, he had only managed to secure his own miserable, lonely future, while I was left holding the real treasure. I stopped giving warnings to people who showed me who they were. I started believing them the first time. They finally learned what it feels like to be small, and I finally learned what it feels like to be free.